Good morning, beautiful women of the Vision Builders community. We are coming in today with our fifth interview in the Blossoming Women's series, The Art and Science of Living a Blooming, Beautiful Life. Today we have with us Dr. Debi Silber, and I am so excited for this interview. I heard about Debi's work some time ago. A dear friend was doing one of your courses, Debi. So I've known a little bit about your work for a while, so I'm very excited for this interview. For those that haven't had the pleasure of coming across Debi's work until now, Debi is the founder of the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute, and over the last 30 years has helped, I think, thousands of people heal physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So welcome, Debi, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to our conversation.
So I want to start just to set a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about moving forward. If we can start with a definition, your definition of betrayal, because we're not just talking about marital betrayal, are we?
No, not at all. I define it as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. And the more we trust and the more we depend on the person, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's totally dependent on their parent and the parent that does something awful, then does something awful, that's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret,
Yeah,
your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still betrayals, different level of cleanup left in the wake.
yeah, sure. So, part of this series is looking at childhood traumas, and obviously betrayal is a big part of that, and how we process incidentally things that siblings may have done, parents may have done, friendships during childhood. It all sort of plays into our belief systems now, and reasons why we make certain choices or hold ourselves back in different ways. So before we get into the work that you've come to be doing, I'd love to get a sense of who you were when you left school, Debi. If you can take yourself back there, what did you imagine you would be doing as you launched yourself into the adult world? Because I don't imagine it was this.
No, certainly, you don't study betrayal unless you have to.
Yeah.
Uh, I actually, it's so interesting because these little angels always show up just right at the right time to redirect me. And I remember I was headed for this field of TV. I wanted to be a TV producer, and so TV production, broadcast journalism, and I found it personally, it wasn't what I was looking for. And I realized I wanted to help people, something having to do with helping people. And my college roommate says to me one day, she said, are you bored with your job? I'm like, you have no idea. And she said, let's take a class. And then she called back. She said, and I said, okay, whatever. Just sign me up. And she goes, let's like a cooking class or something. And I said, that's fine. And then she called back. She said, let's take it towards something. Let's become dietitians. And I was like, well, okay. So I signed up for this dietetics, master's in nutrition. I was off and running. She never did. And then from there, I became a whole health coach because I had a lot of people coming to me with stress related symptoms, illnesses, conditions, disease. Then I became a functional diagnostic nutritionist and to test people for these things. And then after my betrayal, again, I met with a friend who said, I'm thinking about going back to school. And I said, oh my gosh, me too. I was desperate to understand, and that has to do with my betrayal. There wasn't a book on this. I needed a whole PhD in it. And I said, I don't know. I can't find anything. She goes, what about, I'm thinking about this transpersonal psychology. And I said, what the heck is that? And then she said, it's really like the psychology of transformation and human potential. I signed up. She never did.
There's a pattern.
Right. Talk about patterns. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in um in the work that you shared, you talk about family betrayal that happened before your marital betrayal.
Mhm.
So perhaps if we start there and how that played into what you're doing now.
You know, the thing with family betrayal and the details change according to, of course, it could be so many different types of things. But again, it's that breaking of the spoken or unspoken rule.
Yeah.
And let's say the rule in that family is you're safe here, and then you're not. Or you can trust us, and then there's the time when you need to, and then you can't. So it's, again, it's that shattering of the spoken or unspoken rule. And what happens is when that's not healed, we move into our adult relationships, not that they're so necessarily good, they're so familiar.
Yeah.
And these scenarios keep showing up to teach us something. Like when at first it was my family betrayal and I thought I healed from it. I didn't know what to do to heal necessarily. And then it happened again, and this time it was my husband, and that was the deal breaker. So I got him out of the house and looked at the two experiences thinking, what's similar to these two?
Mm.
Because I sensed a pattern here. And people go a lifetime with these repeat experiences, and I was like, I don't want to have this going on, more. And I realized I never took my own needs seriously. It was always about everybody else. I never really stood up for what was important to me, which so many of us women do, right? Here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, this thriving business, and it had never been about me. So
Mm.
for me to enroll in a PhD program, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know where I was going to find the time, but it was so uh, different than anything I had done.
Yeah.
It changed my entire life, and thankfully now the lives of a lot of other people too. It changed my health, my family, my work. It changed everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you get that calling, that feeling of like I can't not do this, you
Mhm.
always find a way to make it work. I think it's part of this life journey that I think we're all born with. I'm becoming more and more convinced that we're born with this journey that we're all on, and life just keeps putting the next piece in front of us, and we can ignore it for a while, but the universe just keeps tapping
Mhm.
until we hear it or until we follow that path. But if I think about my own journey and having been in different areas of this work for many years now, there are lots of things that happen through childhood and with my family that I looked at, and it was like this couldn't possibly be something that's still defining how I behave today. Whether it was a teacher yelling at me in a classroom, which I still remember very vividly, the shame and it paralyzed my. I don't know, he wanted me to say his name, and because he was being so insistent about it, the stress response just shut my brain down. And so now I have this ongoing fear of forgetting people's names, and it links back to this moment. So there's all these different little things, I think, that just add up to the behaviors that we see now. But the more that we can shine a little light on those, a little loving spotlight on those, and start shifting them, it's amazing how it frees up so many things.
You're so right, because especially when it comes to something like betrayal,
Yeah.
that was, and anyway, just to sort of finish up that story there. So I
Mm.
enrolled in this program, and it was time to do a study. I studied betrayal only because I wanted to get myself out of this jam. And then that study made these 3 discoveries. And it was so interesting because betrayal is such a different type of trauma, and it shows up. One of the things is it's like the as we were saying before, where the faces change, but it's kind of the same thing.
Mm.
And we can go from friend to friend to friend, partner to partner to partner. Like for you, the response you had from that teacher, there's this profound lesson waiting to be learned. And when it comes to betrayal, until and unless we get that, we're going to have opportunities that look like people to teach us. And then the beauty is once the lesson's learned, there's no reason to repeat it. And that's not to say that betrayal is our fault. It's not. It's our opportunity.
Mm.
Like for me, it was boundaries were getting crossed, and not really taking my own needs seriously. But once you realize something like that, betrayal shatters everything. The
Mm.
old you, the old relationship, which people are so afraid of. But that's the only way to birth the new. whether it's a new you, which, like with my family, it wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something from the ground up, new, with the person who hurt you. And not long ago, as two totally transformed people, my husband and I married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. But that never would have happened if the old everything didn't get torn down in order to rebuild the new.
Mm. So how long was the gap between the first wedding and the second?
Yeah, it was about a year. Now keep in mind, it was quick because I was doing the research, and everything that the study proved worked, I did. Everything the study proved did not work, I didn't do. And also, I think he transformed, and I'm happy to share what the discoveries were because that's really what's exciting about it. But also, he transformed to the level that he did, I think because he was the one who told our kids, if anything has you wake up and realize what's important, it's losing everything that matters.
Yeah.
And he lost all of us. And you know, to have your 4 kids look at you like you did what to mom, you know. So that was a huge wake up call for him. And so his life as he'd known it had crashed and burned just like mine did. And my only intention was just to take care of the kids and run my business and take care of all these dogs I had.
Yeah.
That was, I didn't think past that, but I do remember a moment going through the study saying, I have no idea how I'm going to heal from this, but if I do, I'm taking everybody with me.
Yeah. Yeah. So we hear a lot about forgiveness and the role of forgiveness, and thinking about forgiveness when you're really in the depths of that horrible grief and pain is a very real challenge. So how do you talk about forgiveness, Debbie, when
Yeah.
you're in that place?
A few things. First of all, the PBT Institute founded National Forgiveness Day, which is now every September 1st, which we're really excited about that. Last September 1st was our first one. Forgiveness is, well, of course, we've always heard it's just for us. It really has very little to do with the other person. But I found in this work that it's a crucial component, but at the right time. When it's done too early or for the wrong reasons, it backfires every single time. Like if you're so hurt, you're so uncomfortable, you just want it to be over already. Fine, I'll forgive you. No. And I remember reading a study that said, if you feel safe and valued and you forgive, you feel better. If you do not feel safe and valued and you forgive, you feel worse. And when I was writing trust again, I was like, I'm going to up that a notch. And instead of forgive, I'm going to turn that into rebuild or reconcile. So it would sound like this. If you feel safe and valued and you reconcile, you feel better. If you do not feel safe and valued and you reconcile, you feel worse. And a lot of people reconcile because of this. Was actually in the study, there were 3 groups who did not heal. One group, and I'm happy to share, like I said, those discoveries so you see more about what I mean. But there was one group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of fear of breaking up a family, uh, financial fear, religious reasons, that was a big one. They just tried to turn the other cheek, look the other way. I saw 2 things with that group. Number 1, a further deterioration of the relationship. And number 2, that group was the most physically sick. Your broken heart just can't take that. But people are so afraid of that complete and utter death and destruction of the old.
Yeah. And I can see how this would come up in families as, in rather than just romantic relationships, because if a family's a strong Catholic and then one child leaves and decides to step away from that faith, it can feel like a betrayal of the family as well. So it plays out in lots of different areas.
Absolutely. And betrayal is a different type of trauma. I mean, that was the first discovery that needs a different way to heal. I had been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease, and I was like, Betrayal feels different. I didn't want to assume it was the same for all my study participants. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So
Mm,
the entire self gets shattered. Rejection,
mm,
abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, right? Like, for example, if you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss, life will never be the same. You don't necessarily question the relationship.
yeah,
You don't question your ability to trust. You don't question your sanity. With betrayal, you do. So that type of healing needed its own name, which is now called post betrayal transformation, the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal.
yeah. I am a big proponent of the healing power of stories when women come together and hear other people's stories. And, this is the foundation of why I'm doing this particular series.
Mhm.
How do you see that play out in your communities when you bring women together that can share their stories, that having a space to feel heard and to
Yeah,
listen?
it's really important, but the right type of support. That was also what the study proved too, because the wrong type of support can actually keep you stuck.
Yeah,
But when the stories lift and inspire, it's incredibly motivating
yeah,
for other people because then it's sort of like that. Oh, if you can do it, maybe I can too.
mm,
So it's really all about what are the tools, resources, strategies, beliefs
mm,
that you are implementing in order to physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually heal
yeah,
through something you never saw coming. And then those stories are deeply transformative. And that's why everybody within the PBT Institute, our coaches, our members, we're all in a club we never wanted to be in, but we're all there to lift and inspire, and then and they heal, and that's the whole idea.
yeah. I subscribe to that wholeheartedly.
Mhm.
I've got 4 children as well, and I remember before my first son, my eldest son, was born, listening to terrible stories of birthing, terrible traumatic stories of birthing. I was like, I need to, I can't, I can't be listening to this anymore. And now in this stage of my life, it's stories of perimenopause and menopause, and there's the communities that are just like, it's hell and it's awful and the struggle, and then again, like, no, I just want to shut the door on that. I want to
Yeah.
listen to people that are really, moving through this stage. Yes, there's messy bits, but with um, the strong connection to the fact that we get to do this really well. So betrayal is the same. Betrayal is the same. So
Absolutely.
you talk about you came up with five, is it 5 steps? Perhaps if you can give us a look at what your discoveries were.
Sure. So the first was, as I mentioned, betrayal is a different type of trauma that needs a different way to heal. That
Mm,
was proven. The second was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's now known as post betrayal syndrome. We've had over 95,000 people take our post betrayal syndrome quiz to see to what extent they're struggling. And I'm happy to share some of them. The first thing is we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true. There's a question on the quiz that says, "Is there anything else you'd like to share?" And people write things like, "My betrayal happened 40 years ago. I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust." So we know you cannot count on time. You can't count on a new relationship to heal it. The only way to heal it is by deliberately and intentionally healing it. Um, Happy to share those stats, but what you were talking about was this for me was the most exciting of the discoveries. And what was found was while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, most people do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 proven predictable stages. What's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage, and we know what we need to do in order to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. Happy to share the stages if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I am very keen to hear it. What's coming into my mind is somebody that's very dear to me lost a baby at newborn and then wasn't able to get pregnant again. And so the feeling of betrayal is almost like at the universe. It's like, what did I do to deserve this
Yeah.
kind of feeling? And so when it's not a person, but that spirit or God or the universe, do you find it's the same process?
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. But it's there's so much to move through. And I mean, my heart goes out to her, and
Mm,
that's certainly a different type of trauma. And I can see
mm,
why she would experience that as a betrayal.
mm,
And there's the work there is that, it may just be finding a sense of peace around it, or there's another lesson there, and who am I to say what that is? It wouldn't be for me to say. That's the deep
yeah,
exploration that would be worth embarking on,
yeah,
for sure. So the when it comes to the 5 stages, I'm going to give you a boiled down version. Coaches are all certified in it. It's all we do within the PBT Institute. Here are the 5 stages. So stage 1 is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing. We're so good at that, right?
mhm,
And neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, if a table only has 2 legs, it's easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. This is by far the scariest of all of the stages. This is where you just get the news that forever changes your life. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So, right here, and everybody remembers their D-Day, right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're now headed for every single stress related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos. You
mm,
cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. You know, the rug has totally been pulled out from under you. Your worldview is shattered. That's your mental model. Trust this person. These are the rules. And in one earth shattering moment, everything you've known and you've been counting on to
mm,
be real and true is no longer.
mm,
So the bottom is bottomed out and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. This is terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything or anyone in order to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Who can I trust?
mm,
Here's the trap, though. This is the stage that most people get stuck in. And here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive your experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came, you think it's good. And because, right? And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5. Transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we plant roots here. We're not supposed to, but we do. And 4 things start to happen. Any questions so far?
no, it's beautiful.
Okay.
It's very clear.
4 things start to happen. The first thing is we start getting all those small self benefits. We get to be right. We like being right. We get our story. We love our story. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to. We don't feel we're getting much else. So we take it.
Mm,
And we're not supposed to be here, this long, but we are. So now the next thing is the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots.
mm,
Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we start putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now we start attracting people and circumstances and relationships towards us to confirm, yep, this is where we belong. That group I was talking about, that lame support group that just keeps you stuck, that's when you find that group and you will actually sabotage your healing
mm,
because you found your people.
mm,
This is where you're healing, but you're afraid to outgrow your betrayer who's not changing, and you sabotage your healing because you're afraid to outgrow your betrayer. This is such a trap. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go.
mm,
Right here, we start numbing, avoiding, distracting. So we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, right? To keep us busy, to take us away from this mental space. Well, you do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing, or
Mm,
that drinking, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. They would say it happened 20 years ago.
mm,
All they did was
yeah,
put themselves in stage 3.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And the trap that I see there is that you start to surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing. So then the conversations all become about, well,
Mhm.
the it's getting stuck in that sort of victim place. It's really easy to stay there. It's really easy to stay there. Painful.
And what makes it even worse, if I tell you how many people come into the PBT Institute with therapy trauma, the most well meaning therapists, but they don't know about the 5 stages. So, if anything glues you to stage 3, it's endlessly unpacking your story
Mm,
without a deliberate and intentional way to move towards stage 4. So, or you go to couples counseling, and the counselor, well meaning, their interest is getting you to be okay. So
mm,
what happens is the betrayer really doesn't have to do much to change, and very often the betrayed is looked at like, well, if you just communicated better.
mm,
I mean, so there's no full on reckoning that needs to happen. So it's frustrating for both the
mm,
betrayed and the betrayer, because they're doing all the work that's keeping them in stage 3.
yeah.
Anyway, if you're willing to let go of the story, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but
Mm,
I control what I do with it. Just in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stopped the massive damage you were accumulating in stages 2 and stage 3.
yeah.
Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If
Mm,
you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, like all your stuff's not there, but you're like, okay, we can do this. We got this.
fresh start.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
But think about, that's what stage 4 feels like. But I found this so interesting. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you, right?
Mm,
You don't take those things that don't represent the version of you want to be in your new space. And what I found was your friends who weren't there for you, you're done. You're done with them. That lame support group, you're not going back. That betrayer who's not changing, you're done. So there's this real change in friendships. And people say to me all the time, Dr. Debbie, what the heck is it me? Yes, it is. You're
mm,
undergoing a transformation. And if the people around you don't rise, they don't come.
yeah.
Very common. So we think, what's happening? It's a transformation. When you've settled into this space, you've made it kind of mentally home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal, self love, self care, eating well, exercise. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now we do. The mind is healing. You're making new rules, new boundaries based on the road you just traveled. And you have a whole new worldview based on everything you've experienced. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about physical and mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded
Mm.
because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
I've in the work that I'm currently doing, I'm seeing a great shift to, and because everybody's talking about, feminine energy versus masculine energy, and these
Mhm.
conversations are becoming much more prevalent. And with Brene Brown's last book, Atlas of the Heart, this sort of shift in focus to emotional intelligence, I think is really exciting. And something that I hope that we all can talk about a lot more, because then our children are going to get what a lot of us didn't get growing up. When you talk about mental and emotional health, I think it's really helpful for people to get a differentiation of the two.
Mhm.
What are you talking about when you differentiate between them?
When I say mental, it's thoughts, and emotional is feelings.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting because when it comes to healing from betrayal, it has so little to do with the logical, rational mind. And it's actually when we bypass the logical, rational mind and get to the heart, that's where the healing happens. And I work with a lot of couples. We have a rebuild program for the betrayer and a reclaim program for the betrayed. So often I'll work with both. And it's so interesting because for the betrayer, even if they're totally different and they absolutely can transform themselves just as the betrayed can too. And one of the biggest things I tell them is you're speaking from your logical, rational mind and trying to reach his or her heart. It doesn't work. So whether if you're going from your logical mind trying to reach his or her logical, rational mind, that's a very surface level conversation. If you're going from your logical, rational mind to their heart, it's not landing. The only language that's felt and understood during the healing process, if you're trying to rebuild with a friend, family member, partner, anybody, is that heart to heart connection, which is very unfamiliar for a lot of people and very uncomfortable because the level of vulnerability is terrifying.
My observation also has been my first marriage broke down. I had 4 children under age when our marriage fell apart, and I found it fascinating that my version of the story is so different to his version of the story, and I wasn't lying, and I don't believe he's lying. But when we're in that, we're looking at our own reality through our own experience, and so coming at that logical conversation together was never going to work. It was impossible because we were seeing 2 different realities. And I think I see this come up in people's experience with their parents and with siblings and with friendships that break up and all sorts of things. And so that plays a pretty big role in our ability to heal, is understanding that we've actually got different realities, different stories going on.
Exactly. We're seeing it through our lens. I mean, anybody who has more than one child, it's those 2 kids can have completely different, or 2 or more can have completely different experiences. And it's just based on what their perception is, their beliefs, their, what they've made something mean. And that's completely individual.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a woman that has all these different bits of education behind you, as well as being a mum and 4 children and all the fur babies that you have, marriage that has fallen apart and come back together, all the people you've worked with, there's a huge body of wisdom that's now accumulated in here. If you were to pull out something and say, this is my superpower, Debi, what is it?
It's an interesting perspective because I have such amazing coaches that I certify, and I'm blessed to be able to work with them. Some of them are so much better at the trauma piece than me. My one zone of genius, it's a weird spot. It's when someone is through enough of their trauma, it's almost like as they're starting to stand up and sort of shake themselves off of, shake everything off of them. And when they get a glimpse that maybe they can do something good with something so painful, that's where I come in, because I only see them, even when I meet them, in stage 5. And so I see the new level of health and the new relationship with someone new, or the person who hurt them, in a very different way, the new business, the new passion projects. So for me, it's if you have that glimmer of hope and possibility, let's go. Yeah. That's the one thing I do.
I love that answer. It's something that I like to highlight a lot with the women that I speak to. Is, when I gave birth to my babies, I wanted to be supported by a woman who had given birth. When I went through my separation, I wanted to speak to women who had been through the separation and come out the other side powerfully. When I go through perimenopause and now into menopause, I want to speak to people. I'm not so interested in people that just learned it in a book. I love been taught by women that have been through something that I'm going through and have come out the other side. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And so I love that superpower, Debbie. Love it. I know that you have this lovely quiz, a gift for our audience. Did you want to just let them know what that is?
Sure. So it's the post-betrayal syndrome quiz, and I didn't share the symptoms. If we have time, I'm happy to.
Yeah,
But
please do. Yeah.
oh, sure. So it's the symptoms that we think are due to age, due to stress, no, they're not. They're due to your unhealed betrayal.
Yeah.
So it's something that, if you share the link, I mean, they can access it. But it's an amazing, it's an amazing look into something where you think, oh my gosh, that really is due to stress. Yeah, I'm happy to. So imagine men and women, just about every country's represented. Figure 95,000 plus people have taken this. 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. And this is any betrayal, by the way. 94% deal with painful triggers. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. Your adrenals have absolutely tanked. 47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, you can't hold food down. Later on, you're emotionally eating, using food for comfort. 45% have digestive issues. That could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, anything. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed, 68% can't focus, 62% can't concentrate. So imagine that. You can't concentrate. You have a gut issue. You're exhausted. You have to take care of your kids. You have to go to work. That's not even emotionally. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. And you could bounce back and forth between those two all day long. 80% are anxious. Just a few more. 84%, this one killed me. 84% have an inability to trust. Think about what that would do to your work, your health, your relationships. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. So they put the big wall up, keep everyone at a distance because they're afraid of that level of vulnerability. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how. That's what betrayal does. Now, what's so interesting about that is those statistics aren't even necessarily from a recent betrayal. That could be from what your parents did when you were a kid. That could be from the girlfriend or boyfriend who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are decades later with those symptoms. That's how you know we're in stage 3. Because when you're in stage 4, stage 5, they all go.
I wonder how many of us are sort of standing with one foot in phase 3 and one in phase 4, because I can see even as you talk where there's different things that are in different, we're in different camps. I think that ability to trust for most women is a very prevalent topic. The ability to really let people in. So many women have terrible experiences through teenagehood with girlfriends, and so then we have a very difficult time creating relationships with women as we move forward, or vice versa with men. If there's been that ability to trust and let people in, I think must be one of the biggest topics that you see.
Absolutely. And people ask me, can trust be repaired? I say no. Can it be rebuilt? Yeah. But it takes a lot of work and you need to do it right. We teach a 4-step trust rebuilding process. Most people are so heartbroken with the shattering of trust, they just want to trust again. So either they want to trust again, or they're so terrified that, like I said, they put that big wall up and keep everyone at a distance. But look at it like this. If that's what you're doing, look at the additional power you've given that person who hurt you. That person could have hurt you 20, 30 years ago. And here you are keeping the potentially really good, heart-centered, loving people at a distance because of what someone did back then that has just been unhealed. That's the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that I've just from my experience, the way that I've been able to dissolve a lot of the holds that these experiences have had on me is to come to a really clear understanding that we're all a product of our environment. So everybody is making a decision that is influenced by the environment that they've grown up in, that they're currently living in. So even people that have done appalling, sexual rape or all these different things that we see people in prisons and so on, it's because something in their environment has made that okay. And we're all got this programming to some degree, and betrayal is just one of those things. So when I can look at all of us with this sort of through this lens of humanity, that we're all doing the best we can with what we know, then that has allowed me to come to that lovely place of peace with all the people that I feel have wronged me along the way, knowing that I have likely wronged other people knowingly and unknowingly along the way as well.
Yeah. And, it's such a great perspective to just see that there are so many reasons why things happen, some of which we will never understand.
Yeah.
And there's the spiritual component that's huge as well. Like
Mm.
when you've been betrayed, you're so trust is shattered. So
Mm.
there's a real, and the study even proved it, there's this real move towards spirituality, whether it's the spiritual side of your religion, just becoming spiritual. And I was the same, because you don't trust the person you trusted the most. You don't trust yourself. So
Mm.
you sort of dip your toe in, well, let me trust in something bigger other than me. And I'll never forget, I saw a spiritual counselor. She's become a dear friend. I walk into her office and
Mm.
she just starts laughing. Like, what are you laughing at? And she said, oh my gosh, how you two planned this. Like, what did you just say? She didn't know anything. She said, yeah, he needed something so catastrophic to crash and burn so he can become the husband, father, friend he was supposed to be. You needed to crash and burn so that you can heal and teach from this deep place of knowing. You're going to have this huge following around betrayal and all these books and an institute. And I'm like, you're crazy.
She wasn't crazy.
You just never know.
No, absolutely not. So it's been a wonderful conversation. I'd love to finish up with two questions. The
Mhm.
first is, if I was to just open up a lovely portal and funnel millions or billions of dollars into your account, that you could create one amazing change in the world, what would it be?
Oh, 100% it would be to end betrayal. I know the devastation
Mm.
it causes for the person who's on the receiving end, the person who did it, and all within their care and reach. So if there's a way to prevent it, that would be great. And if not, I get as many groups, and because we have support groups as well, support groups and coaches, so that someone can shave off decades and move through the stages much quicker and just get back to business.
Does it start with funneling some of this preventative understanding into schools?
I think that would be a great idea. I mean, think about all the things we learn in school that the minute the test is over, we've completely forgotten. I
Mhm.
think learning how to be a better human
Mhm.
would
Yeah,
help a lot of people, learning empathy and compassion and
yeah,
forgiveness and how to just deal with and interact with others. It
yeah.
would be it would be a great class to take.
Yeah, I do feel that there's an enormous overhaul that is coming. Who knows how long it's
Mhm.
going to take in the education systems across the Western world at the least.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's no longer necessary to memorize the last 30 prime ministers or presidents. Like this information, the way we consume information is so different now. And I think this emotional intelligence has got to be the core of where children are now nurtured.
I
So
agree.
my final question is, what does a blooming, beautiful life look like to Debi Silber?
It's feeling abundant in the areas that matter to me, which is family and service and friends and community, and that's it. It's just, yeah, love.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm so excited to share this with people. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much.
All right, beautiful women, that is it from us this morning. We'll be back this evening with another interview for you at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. All right, that's it from us today. So much love and bye for now.